I suspected my husband was planning a divorce, so I moved my assets. 2 weeks later, he filed, then backtracked when his plan backfired. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. Let me be clear, I've never been the sort to jump to conclusions or assume the worst. My husband, Franklin, and I had been together for 6 years and married for 4. Things were solid, or so I thought. We experienced the typical ups and downs, but nothing that made me think, oh, there's a problem here. In reality, throughout the majority of our relationship, we were that couple, completely committed, colleagues. We laughed at stupid inside jokes, argued for hours about which movie to watch, and had a cadence that just worked. I'd organize elaborate date nights, and Franklin would treat me to my favorite takeout after a long day. It felt effortless, as if we had figured out the whole love thing. That is why what occurred next struck me like a ton of bricks. Franklin worked as a sales director, and I was in marketing, so we both had good salaries. We had just refinanced the house, and we were talking about starting a college fund for our future, distant future, but still. Everything was going according to the plan we'd meticulously laid out. The shift happened around 6 months ago. Franklin had just received a big promotion, and while I was thrilled for him, I noticed a change. At first, it was minor details, things you'd likely miss if you weren't paying attention. He began carrying his phone everywhere. And I mean everywhere. Before this, his phone would sit on the coffee table for hours, and he didn't mind who picked it up. He'd leave it charging by the bed while he made coffee. Now, the phone was a literal appendage. Even when he was only going to the kitchen for a glass of water, or moving from the living room to the bedroom, the phone was in his hand. One day, I made this joke, trying to lighten the mood. What, are you running some secret spy ring now, Franklin? He chuckled, maybe a little too quickly, and added, no, honey. Work's been emailing me a lot. A lot of back and forth with the overseas team. Okay, fine. A promotion meant more responsibility. But a few days later, he created a password. That one caught me off guard because he had never used one before. We both had access to each other's devices. When I casually inquired why, he responded something vague about security and hackers. You know how much sensitive company data I have on here now, Darlene. It's part of the new management rules, he said, not meeting my eyes. I didn't press it since I didn't want to appear paranoid, but it simply felt off. The phone felt like a secret. And it did not end there. He began taking calls outside the room, which he had never done before. It wasn't subtle either. His phone would ring, and he'd say, oh, let me just grab this real quick, before disappearing into the bedroom or outside on the porch. The porch, in the freezing cold. If I inquired who it was, he would just say, just a colleague from work, Darlene. Then I noticed a new habit, keeping his phone face down on the table. I was reaching over to give him the TV remote one night, and my hand nearly brushed his phone. He hastily moved it out of the way. It was one of those blink and you miss it moments, yet it stayed with me. I felt a cold knot start to form in my stomach. I realized I was becoming a detective in my own home, and that thought was horrifying. The phone was the first signal. The distance was the second. Conversations that used to flow easily now felt like pulling teeth. If I brought up future plans, such as where should we go for our anniversary, or do you think we should start saving for a new car, he'd simply nod and say, yeah, we'll see, before shifting the subject. Everything felt temporary to him. It all began to feel like a slow, painful emotional withdrawal. The emotional withdrawal was bad enough, but it was on a random Wednesday that things really clicked into place. Franklin informed me he was seeing a buddy for coffee after work. It didn't sound strange, he does that occasionally. I happened to be running errands in the same area. I was picking up some special paper for a client presentation, so I figured, why not surprise him? It will be cute. Maybe it would break the ice we'd been living under. When I arrived, however, he was not with his friend. He stood outside the cafe, walking back and forth, his phone placed against his ear. I remained in my car because something about the way he spoke seemed serious, almost conspiratorial. I didn't intend to eavesdrop, but I was close enough, and I overheard phrases like, "She says it's almost ready," and "starting fresh soon." My stomach sank. I couldn't figure out what he was saying, but it didn't sound like a job or friend conflict. It sounded grander, like something he had meticulously planned. A whole life plan. When he returned home later that evening, I asked him how his coffee date went, attempting to maintain a casual tone. He told me a complete narrative about his pal complaining about her boyfriend. Typical, right? Drama, he finished with a fake laugh. I just gazed at him for a second, watching his eyes dart away. But then, he shifted gears, and this was the true sign. He brought up our finances. "Look, Darlene," he started, "I just think we should have everything in one place, you know? Like all our account info, passwords, inheritance documents, that kind of thing. Just in case of emergency." I wasn't sure what to say. This was something we'd never discussed before, and the timing seemed bizarre given everything else I'd noticed. "What kind of emergencies, Franklin?" I inquired, attempting to keep my tone casual. He shrugged again, avoiding my gaze. "It's just smart, isn't it? What if something happens to one of us, or what if we need to make a big financial decision quickly?" His argument made sense on the surface, but something about the way he expressed it made me nervous. It was too rehearsed and polished, as if he had been waiting for the appropriate time to bring it up. I nodded and murmured something like, "Yeah, I guess that's a good idea," but inside, alarms were ringing. Why now? Why are we suddenly concerned about arranging our inheritance and finances when we've always kept them separate and loose? That night, my mind kept reliving his words, attempting to figure out what it meant. Was this just typical adult behavior, and was I reading too much into it? But then I remembered the phone calls, the talk I overheard in the cafe, and how distant he'd been recently. It all began to mount up, and I did not like the image it was painting. A few days later, he mentioned it again. We were in the kitchen. I was making dinner, and he was looking through his phone when he remarked, "Have you thought more about organizing the bank stuff, like, do you know where all the account details are?" I put the knife down and turned to face him. "Okay, what's going on?" I inquired, attempting to keep my tone light but firm. "You've been bringing up the finances a lot lately. Is there something we need to talk about?" He finally looked up from his phone, startled that I had pressed him on it. "No, nothing's wrong," he responded hastily, making me giggle. "I just think it's important, that's all, you know, for emergencies." His response seemed ambiguous, too vague. I nodded and let it go, but the way he avoided providing a direct answer made me even more suspicious. It didn't seem like a casual suggestion anymore. It felt like he was concealing something, but I had no idea what it was. So the next day, while he was at work, I decided to look into our finances. I opened our joint account online and discovered something unexpected. Over the last month, a few tiny moves had taken place. Nothing large, but small quantities, $500, $800, $1,200, that did not appear to have a clear purpose. They were not designated for bills, groceries, or anything similar. The descriptions were vague: transfer, miscellaneous. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it appeared that he had been systematically withdrawing money from the account for some reason, which I couldn't figure out. I considered addressing him, but something told me to wait. If I was wrong, I'd look ridiculous, and if I was correct, I had to be careful. It was eating at me, so I contacted someone I trusted, an old college friend who also happens to be a lawyer, Lyle. I told him what I'd discovered, while trying not to sound like a conspiracy theorist. "Look, Darlene," Lyle remarked after I'd explained everything, "I'm not saying something is absolutely going on, but you're not insane for wanting to be ready. If you're concerned about protecting your assets, especially the house, now is the moment to do so. Better safe than sorry. He walked me through what I could do, simple procedures to ensure my finances were protected if something happened. He focused on the concept of an irrevocable trust. It was a big word, but the concept was simple: move the assets into a separate legal entity so they couldn't be touched by the divorce process once it started. I'll admit that taking such drastic action felt out of the ordinary. It felt like I was preparing for something dreadful, even though I wasn't sure what was wrong. But the more I considered it, the more it made sense. If he was really up to something, and I was beginning to suspect he was, I needed to defend myself. It was not an easy decision to make. However, this wasn't just about money or assets, it was about the life we had created together. I kept repeating images in my head: our wedding day, the late-night conversations about our dreams, and the weird little jokes we shared. How did we arrive here? Was this what our marriage had come to? The prospect of taking these measures felt like conceding defeat, as if I was officially abandoning the trust we previously shared. That evening, while Franklin was out at the gym, I sat at my desk and took out my laptop. My hand shook as I opened the computer and began browsing through everything: bank accounts, investment accounts, and the property deed. Each paper I studied felt like a betrayal, but a persistent voice in my head reminded me that this was about survival, not sabotage. I didn't mean to hurt him. I couldn't get rid of the idea that if I didn't act now, I'd regret it later. I compiled a list of everything I could transfer and how to do it without raising suspicion. I had to move quickly before he got the next large deposit from his promotion bonus. I then called my mother, Vera. "Mom, I need you to hold on to some things for me for a while. If it's nothing bad, just something I need to do to protect myself, just in case." She was silent for a minute, likely trying to figure out what I wasn't saying. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Her voice was filled with anxiety. "Yeah, I lied. It's just a precaution. Nothing to worry about. It's a messy legal thing, Mom, related to some old inheritance money." She didn't press me, but I could hear the pause in her voice when she responded. "Of course, Darlene. Whatever you need." I hung up the phone with an odd mix of relief and shame. I despised engaging her in this mess, but knowing my mother had my back provided some steadiness in an otherwise chaotic environment. The logistics of the transfer were complicated, designed to look like a simple restructuring for tax purposes, but Lyle had laid out the steps clearly. I had to execute this perfectly. I started with the liquid assets, the money in our joint savings account that wasn't immediately required for bills. I moved it to a new, separate account in my name first, under the guise of setting up the new automated college fund account we had discussed, and then immediately into the trust. I was careful not to empty the joint account. I left enough for 2 months of mortgage and utilities, just to keep appearances. The investment accounts were trickier. They required more paperwork and multiple signatures. Lyle had prepared a restructuring agreement for me to present to Franklin, claiming it was boilerplate from my firm about managing executive assets. The next morning, I approached Franklin at the kitchen table. He was enjoying his coffee, engrossed in a financial news article. "Honey," I started, trying to keep my voice even, "can you sign this? It's just some paperwork my firm had me get sorted out for tax season. Standard stuff for our level, apparently. It just needs both signatures because of the joint income reporting." He glanced at the papers, which were mixed in with some actual tax documents. "Oh, sure, Darlene. Looks like a bunch of legalese," he said, barely reading it. He quickly scrawled his name on the designated lines and handed them back. That signature was for the transfer of the investment accounts into the trust. It was not a lie, just a carefully curated omission of the truth. I felt a hot flash crawl up my neck as I watched him sign, but I couldn't stop. I told myself I was simply protecting our shared future from his unilateral, selfish decision. The house deed was the final step. Lyle drew up the papers for the transfer into the irrevocable trust under Vera's name. This was done off-site at Lyle's office with my mother present. "Darlene, Are you sure about this? My mother, Vera, asked, her hand resting on mine. This is a major step. It's the house. I have to, Mom, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He's planning something. I can feel it. If he files for divorce and the house is still jointly titled, I lose half, no questions asked. This way, it's safe. It's protected inheritance for me. Vera nodded, her expression grim. Okay, then. Your father would be proud of you for being smart. By the time Franklin arrived home that night, the majority of my assets, our cash, investments, and even the house equity, were legally in my mother's name, sealed in an uncontested trust. He didn't notice anything. He walked in, kissed my cheek, and asked if I wanted to watch a movie. He appeared okay, but inside, I was a wreck. Part of me felt awful, as if I had betrayed his trust. But another part of me felt relieved, as if I was finally gaining control of a situation that had spiraled out of my control. I was playing defense against the person I thought would always have my back. I kept a small amount in our joint account to keep up appearances, but the rest was locked down. The waiting game began. Over the next 3 days, I tried to maintain a normal routine. I didn't want to let him know that anything had changed. Franklin appeared satisfied, even unusually cheery at times. He was relaxed. He offered to cook dinner twice. He even suggested a weekend trip. However, rather than putting me at ease, it increased my suspicion. If he was plotting something, he did an excellent job of concealing it. But he made one crucial mistake: he never brought up the finances again. Not even after I questioned him the last time. It was as if the subject had evaporated from his memory. At first, I believed I had overreacted, and he dismissed the subject since it wasn't relevant. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized he was avoiding it, almost as if he was afraid to bring it up again after I pressed him. I noticed him staring at me a few times, too. It wasn't a loving gaze, it was assessing. As if he was assessing my mood or contemplating whether to say something. Every time I noticed, he'd quickly return his attention to whatever he was doing, his phone, the TV, a book. It was slight, but it was present. It felt like he was waiting for me to bring it up, as if he didn't want to push the issue again. The silence only made me feel more anxious. It wasn't like him to drop anything he considered essential, and the way he avoided it suddenly appeared deliberate. If he was testing the waters, he was not going in. If he was waiting for something, I was not about to give him the go-ahead. Whatever his next move was, I knew I had to be one step ahead. Something was coming, but I didn't know when or how. All I could do was prepare. That night, I made certain that everything was solid. I glanced over the paperwork again, double-checking every aspect of the asset transfers. The house, the savings, the investments, everything was now legally in Vera's name. I even called her to confirm that she had all of the necessary papers. 2 weeks had passed, and everything appeared normal, too normal, frankly. Franklin was acting more loving, even starting to talk about unrelated topics like work or what we should eat for the evening. It threw me off because he'd been aloof for months and avoiding anything more than superficial conversations. Part of me began to question whether I had been overreacting all along. Maybe the strange conduct was merely stress or something I didn't comprehend. But then, one random Friday night, 2 weeks and 1 day after the house was legally protected, he sat me down on the couch, turned off the television, and said, "Darlene, we need to talk." My stomach dropped. I knew what he was going to say before he did. "I think we should get a divorce," he replied, his voice so calm it seemed prepared. It wasn't furious or emotional, it was simply frigid, as if he had told me we had run out of milk. I stared at him, unsure how to respond. As he explained his argument, he mentioned needing space, wanting to figure himself out, and feeling like he'd lost his identity in the marriage. Standard breakup phrases that didn't really explain anything. But then he said something that struck a different tone. "You know, I've made a lot of sacrifices for you over the years, and I don't think you really appreciate them." I deserve more. That last part stung. It wasn't just that he wanted out, it was that he framed it as if I owed him something, that everything was my fault, and he was simply claiming what was properly his. I sat there trying to understand what he was saying. A new question arose: why now? Then he gave me the final piece of the puzzle. A friend of mine has been helping me see things more clearly, he continued, not looking at me. A friend. I remained still, letting him speak, but my mind was racing. Who was this friend? Why were they so involved in my marriage? The way he stated it was not casual, it seemed like someone had been hyping him up, convincing him that leaving me wasn't simply a choice but a strategy he needed to implement. And the more he talked about how he deserved more because of his sacrifices, the more I became skeptical. Sacrifices? What kind of sacrifice? I worked hard to offer him the life he desired, and it wasn't just about money. When he asked to move closer to his job after his promotion, I agreed, even though it meant a lengthier commute for me. When he wanted to attend that pricey leadership retreat last year, I made sure we budgeted for it, even foregoing a vacation I was looking forward to so he could go. I backed him when he changed careers twice, telling him it was fine to take the risk because I wanted him happy. I remembered birthdays and random things he had mentioned loving. I listened to him complain about his job, friends, and family. I didn't always get it right, but I did try. That's why his "I deserve more" line hurt so much, but I didn't buy it. He was not upset due to anything I did or did not do. He was upset because something had changed in him. Perhaps it was the acquaintance he kept bringing up, or something else. But the man sitting in front of me was not the man I married, and I was not going to let him rewrite our marriage tale to fit his new narrative. I didn't press him at the moment. Instead, I nodded and said something innocuous such as, "If that's how you feel, Franklin, I guess we should figure out the next steps." He seemed startled that I wasn't arguing or begging him to stay, but I didn't mind. My attention had already changed. I needed to know who or what was causing his sudden, planned shift in conduct. This was something greater, and I wasn't going to let it surprise me any more than it had already. After that chat, he went into his own apartment. On Monday, I received the divorce papers. Let me tell you, he didn't only want to stop the relationship, they were planning to take everything. Half the house, my savings, my assets, and the car. He wanted it all, plus some ambiguous spousal support clauses that made little sense given my high salary. It seemed as if he was expecting me to give him all I had worked for. At first, I assumed he was just being vengeful, but the way he articulated his demands, so specific and aggressive, reassured me that he had someone guiding him through this. So I started digging. I couldn't just ask him who he'd been talking to, so I had to be clever. I began with his social media. He hadn't blocked me, and even though he didn't post frequently, I searched through his tagged photographs and comments, looking for someone new. That's when I discovered the pattern. A woman named Priscilla repeatedly liked and commented on his posts. Nothing obscene, but enough to make me pause. I clicked on her profile, which was public. At first glance, she didn't appear to be much more than a successful 30-something marketing professional who had recently gone through a divorce herself. But as I scrolled down her feed, I spotted something unusual. She posted a photo at the same cafe I'd seen him at weeks before, on the very same day I overheard him discussing starting fresh. My gut churned. I kept scrolling. More subtle signals were a comment on one of his pictures that read, "You've got this, F," as well as a selfie she'd taken from what appeared to be his new apartment, a rental he hadn't told me about. None of it was substantial evidence, but it was enough to raise my suspicion. I wasn't sure what to do with this information, but I knew I couldn't just sit there and wait for solutions to come my way. His statement of a friend who helped her get through things remained with me, and I wanted to know who it was. I decided to contact one of our mutual acquaintances, Janice. She and Franklin had been friends for years, so she knew what was going on. I kept the conversation light at first, asking if she'd lately spoken with Franklin or if anything seemed strange. Janice reacted swiftly, saying she had no idea about the friend or any suggestions. She was overly defensive. Look, Darlene, I can't get involved. It's too messy. You should talk to him. She cut the conversation off defensively, claiming she couldn't help me. The entire situation felt rushed, as if she was trying to avoid becoming engaged. Not willing to give up, I called another buddy, Emily. I followed the same pattern, stating that I was simply trying to make sense of things. She was apprehensive at first, responding vaguely to my questions. When I pressed her more, she quickly ended the call, leaving me even more skeptical than before. I sat there, frustrated, trying to figure out my next move. My mind was racing. Why were my friends suddenly so protective of Franklin? Then, to my astonishment, Emily called back about 20 minutes later. She told me she needed to make sure what she said didn't come back to her. I can't talk long, Darlene, but listen, Emily whispered over the phone, the sound of traffic in the background. I assured her it wouldn't. Just tell me what's going on. After a long pause, Emily revealed what she knew. Apparently, Franklin had been spending a lot of time with someone named Priscilla, whom he had met at work. Darlene, she's known for having a very aggressive divorce settlement, Emily said. She's been coaching Franklin through his. Hearing that name felt like a puzzle piece fitting into place. Priscilla. Aggressive divorce settlement. Coaching. It was evident that this was more than just his need for space or to find himself. Someone else was in the picture, directing his decisions, and I was eager to discover why. I thanked Emily profusely, assuring her that her secret was safe with me. The betrayal burned, but what hurt the most was how premeditated everything was. He wasn't simply abandoning me, he was leaving me with nothing, and he was accompanied by someone at all times. I needed to confirm the affair. I chose to confront it in my own manner. That Saturday, I headed to the upscale apartment building he had moved into a few weeks before, the one he claimed was temporary corporate housing. I parked a block away, trying to confirm what I already suspected. I sat there for 2 hours. It was a cold wait, but I felt oddly calm. I was simply waiting for the final truth, the final piece of evidence that would justify every action I had taken. A few hours later, Franklin and Priscilla stepped out of the building. They did not hold hands or kiss or anything overtly affectionate, which was a classic mistake many cheaters make. But the way they walked together, close, leaning in to talk, laughing at an inside joke, was plenty. They got into his new lease car, the one he bought after his promotion, and drove away, leaving me sitting there, staring at the spot where they had been. I did not follow them. I did not need to. At that point, it was evident. He hadn't simply stopped loving me, he'd been preparing to go with someone else, who had a clear interest in my assets. And now everything made sense, the unexpected distancing, the money questions, the forceful demands in the divorce papers. She was using the divorce as a stepping stone to whatever life she was creating with Priscilla, but he had no idea what I had planned for him. I went home that night, my head racing with everything I'd learned. The betrayal burned, but the knowledge that I had already safeguarded my future was a powerful, quiet comfort. The first mediation session felt strained from the time we stepped in. Franklin's face was tight, his posture radiating false confidence. I arrived with Lyle, who looked calm and professional, carrying only a slim folder. Franklin's lawyer, a slick man in a tailored suit, arrived with a binder so thick that it appeared they were bringing a case against a Fortune 500 firm. He began listing Franklin's demands as if they were entirely reasonable. My client requires the immediate liquidation of the marital home, with the proceeds split 50-50, the lawyer started, his voice booming slightly. Furthermore, we require the full transfer of all jointly held investment accounts, as well as a significant portion of Ms. Darlene's retirement and inheritance funds, along with a sizable spousal support payment, given Mr. Franklin's temporary income adjustment after his promotion. I just sat there, listening to the absurd list. He wanted half the house, all my assets, my car, and a significant portion of my salary moving forward. It was a pure, predatory cash grab, clearly orchestrated by Priscilla. I remained silent, seeming to listen, but I was waiting for Lyle to make his move. Franklin kept glancing at me, a smug little smirk on his face, as if he knew he had me backed into a corner. When it was finally our turn, Lyle smiled politely and gently slid a small stack of paperwork across the table, not the thick binder, just a simple stack. Before we proceed with discussing the distribution of alleged marital assets, I think it's important for everyone to review these documents, Lyle said, his voice calm, contrasting sharply with Franklin's lawyer's bombast. Franklin's lawyer, Mr. Slick, took the papers and skimmed through them. His confident posture changed fast. His brow furrowed harder with each page he flipped through. "What is this?" he inquired, gazing at Lyle, clearly agitated. "These documents," Lyle said calmly, leaning back in his chair, "show the legal transfer of all major marital assets, including the home deed, the liquid investment accounts, and the entirety of Ms. Darlene's personal savings, into an irrevocable trust under the care of her mother, Mrs. Vera X." The room became utterly silent. You could hear the buzzing of the fluorescent lights. Mr. Slick's face was frozen. He looked at Franklin, confused and frustrated. "You didn't mention this," he stated flatly. Franklin snatched the papers from his hands, flipping through them, his face flushing crimson. He looked at the notarized signatures and dates, his eyes scanning Lyle's detailed legal summary. "This can't be real," he said, the confidence completely gone. Franklin looked up at me, his countenance changing from incredulity to pure, volcanic rage. "You planned this," he muttered, leaning forward in his chair, gazing at me as if I'd committed a heinous crime. "You knew I was going to file and you set this up to screw me over." I did not respond. I just sat there, my hands folded neatly in my lap, and let him connect the dots on his own. It was the most satisfying moment of my adult life. The moment he realized his carefully constructed, Priscilla-guided plan had hit a brick wall. Mr. Slick, apparently agitated, requested Lyle to elaborate. So Lyle did, slowly, deliberately, and with every piece of evidence necessary to make the transfers irrefutable. The transfers, Lyle explained, were completed 3 full weeks before the filing of this petition. The trust is irrevocable, fully legal, and unfortunately for Mr. Franklin, uncontestable under state law. Ms. Darlene had full legal rights to structure her assets as she saw fit at that time, as there was no pending divorce action. The dates aligned exactly, indicating that I had transferred everything well before he filed. The signatures were duly notarized, and the trust was solid. There was nothing they could do to challenge it. Franklin was furious. "You're unbelievable. I can't believe you'd do something like this to me," he yelled, practically spitting the words across the table. I still did not say anything. What was there to say? This was not about me doing anything to him, this was to defend myself because he had made it apparent he was not going quietly. He had planned to bleed me dry to finance his life with Priscilla. Mr. Slick quickly called a recess, pulling Franklin out into the hallway. They huddled, talking in hushed, angry tones. I could see Priscilla's influence draining out of Franklin with every frantic gesture he made. When they returned, Mr. Slick looked defeated. "We need to rethink our strategy," he mumbled to the mediator. Everyone in the room knew they had no further moves to make. When we walked out of the building, Franklin took me aside in the hallway, his expression a mix of rage and desperation. "This isn't over," he added, his tone low and menacing. "You're going to regret this, Darlene." I looked him straight in the eye. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lose my cool. I delivered my final, single line in response to the man I thought I'd spend my life with. "I already regret trusting you, Franklin. That's the only regret I have." I turned and walked away. Things escalated faster than I had anticipated following the mediation session. Franklin went into complete meltdown mode, almost instantly. It began with the calls, endless calls. At first, he appeared calm, even remorseful, leaving voicemails that began, "Darlene, I think we just need to talk," or "I know this got messy, but we can fix it." He even tried to manipulate me, "We don't need the lawyers, baby. Let's just settle this between us. Think about our future." When I did not answer, the tone changed. By the second day, his messages alternated between sobbing and screaming. One voicemail would be him lamenting about making a mistake and not wanting to lose what we had created together. Then he'd launch into a furious tirade, accusing me of being stingy and cruel, blaming me for everything that was wrong in his life, even the stalled progress on his big promotion project. I ignored it all. Lyle told me not to engage, and I honestly did not want to. I was finished playing his games. But he wasn't finished. When the calls and texts did not work, he began telling stories to our mutual friends. Friends informed me that he had been telling people that the divorce was a hoax and that it was all part of a larger farce, a prank. A prank, Darlene? Who would believe that? My friend Harriet asked me over lunch, shaking her head. The flaws in his story quickly became apparent. Friends began to ask questions like, if it was a prank, why did you file actual legal paperwork, or why hire a lawyer and make such specific demands if it wasn't serious? When others didn't instantly accept the hoax justification, he doubled down. He said it was not a joke but rather a test of our relationship strength. He began casting himself as the victim, claiming that my reaction had hurt and betrayed him, that I had gone too far and broken our marriage's trust. He was trying to rewrite history, frame himself as the victim, and me as the cold-hearted manipulator. At first, some individuals seemed to believe his stories. I'd get strange emails or comments from acquaintances like, "Wow, I didn't realize things were so rough for him," or "Why didn't you just tuck it out, Darlene, instead of being so drastic?" It was annoying, but I knew the truth would eventually come out. The truth about Priscilla and the true motivation behind the money grab. All I needed was one final piece of evidence to shut down his smear campaign forever. This was the hardest part, feeling isolated, feeling judged by people who only heard one side of the story. I kept reminding myself that I had the truth, and I had my mother, Vera. That was enough. If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below, so I know you're wonderful, and I understand you're with me on this entire journey. Your support is a huge encouragement, cheering me on. Go ahead and comment the number 1 so I can recognize you, and now, listen to me continue my story. The truth came out due to a common buddy, let us call him Herbert. Herbert and I were not particularly close, but we had always been nice. A few weeks after the mediation, he messaged me unexpectedly, stating he had something I needed to see. When we met at a neutral spot, a diner across town, he brought out his phone and showed me a series of text messages between Franklin and Priscilla. I was confused at first. "How did you even get these?" I inquired, scanning through the messages. Herbert revealed that he and Priscilla shared a mutual buddy who had heard their talks. Apparently, this common acquaintance had grown concerned about the way things were going, especially when Priscilla began gloating about how she was assisting Franklin in securing his financial future, which everyone knew meant getting my assets. It didn't take long for that common buddy to figure out what securing his future really meant, trying to bleed me dry. Feeling awful about remaining silent, the buddy grabbed screenshots of the texts and sent them to Herbert, believing he had a better relationship with me and could warn me. "This guy's been playing both sides, Darlene," Herbert replied, shaking his head. "He's been hyping him up to take you for everything while making him believe he'd be there for him afterward. They were planning a life off of your inheritance." Herbert gave me the texts and said, "I thought you should know. You don't deserve this, Darlene." The texts were terrible. Franklin wasn't just venting to Priscilla about the divorce, he was actively planning his future steps with her, and she was guiding him through them. A message Franklin left read, "Once the settlement's done, we'll have everything we need. I just need her to agree to the terms, she's so naive she won't even check the paperwork." Priscilla responded, "Don't back down, make her feel guilty if you have to. She owes you. We'll start fresh once you've got the money. Think about that new investment property." I sat there, staring at Herbert's phone, trying to understand what I was reading. This was neither a misunderstanding nor an emotional response to a failed marriage. This was a cold, deliberate manipulation orchestrated to strip me of my assets and my future security, especially my retirement. I thanked Herbert and he left. My thoughts were racing. Everything made sense now: his abrupt isolation, his fixation with our finances, and his harsh demands throughout the divorce. It was all part of a plan, one he had been developing with Priscilla behind the scenes. The texts soon circulated among our mutual friends. Herbert shared them with a few friends, and they quickly spread. His story suddenly ceased to be credible. The change was nearly immediate. People who had previously defended Franklin or remained neutral suddenly recognized him for who he truly was. Even his closest allies started to distance themselves. By the time the divorce was finalized, he had only his personal things. His lawyer quietly dismissed his complaint after recognizing there was no legal basis to stand on. All of those bold requests had crumbled under the weight of the documents Lyle had produced, and the trust one had established with my mother, Vera, was unbreakable. Priscilla seemed to vanish as soon as things began to unravel. I wouldn't be surprised if she used him as much as he did me. From what I could tell, she'd been feeding him fantasies of independence and a new beginning, but the moment it became evident he wasn't going away with anything, she was gone. The promotion and the salary meant nothing without my assets. Without Priscilla in his corner, Franklin's confidence plummeted. The calls and texts continued, but they became increasingly desperate. He was not accusing me anymore. He begged. "Can we just talk, please? I'll do anything to fix this," one voicemail stated. "A different opinion: you don't have to forgive me, but can't we just settle this and move on? I'll drop everything if you just talk to me." I did not respond. I could not. It was too late to reverse the harm. Even his family began to drift away. His sister contacted me at one time, apologizing for some of the things she had said before, when she believed his side of the story. "I didn't know what he was doing to you, Darlene. I'm sorry I ever took his word for it," she said. As for me, I received the house, my savings, and something I hadn't experienced in a long time: peace of mind. My mother, Vera, as usual, was my rock. She arrived with buckets of paint and a list of suggestions to help me reclaim the area as mine. We repainted the living room and turned Franklin's old office into a beautiful new reading room. We started that college fund in my name, just like I planned. Now life feels like it's mine again. No more second-guessing every small interaction, no longer feeling betrayed, just peace. Franklin is a chapter from my history that I no longer read, and the remainder of the story is entirely up to me to write. Thank you. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know if you've ever had to use a smart legal move to protect yourself. And so, this story reminds us of the profound strength that lies within us when we choose to stand up for ourselves, even in the face of betrayal and uncertainty. It's a testament to the power of self-worth and the importance of trusting our instincts. Life often presents us with challenges that test not only our resilience but also our ability to protect what truly matters: our peace, our values, and our future. Through this journey, we see how courage and preparation can transform a moment of vulnerability into one of empowerment. It's not about revenge or bitterness, but about reclaiming control over your life and refusing to let others dictate your narrative. This is a story of quiet strength, of finding clarity amidst chaos, and of choosing to prioritize yourself when the world seems to conspire against you. What about you? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to take bold steps to protect your peace or your future? Share your thoughts below, or simply comment good if this story inspired you to value yourself a little more today. Let's continue to learn and grow together.